The velvet curtains in the boutique fitting room felt heavier than they should have been as I stood on the platform, watching my reflection multiply in 3 angled mirrors. The wedding dress hugged my body like a second skin, ivory silk cascading to the floor in waves that caught the afternoon light. My mother sat behind me, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while the seamstress circled with her pincushion, making final adjustments. "You look absolutely stunning, Elena," my mother whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thomas is such a lucky man." I forced a smile, the same practiced expression I'd perfected over the past 2 years. Thomas, my fiancé. The man everyone said was perfect for me. Kind, stable, predictable. A junior partner at his father's law firm, with a 5-year plan that included 2 children, a house in the suburbs, and annual vacations to the same resort in Maine. The seamstress tugged at the bodice, and I inhaled sharply as the fabric tightened across my ribs. Through the boutique's large windows, I could see the Chicago streets bustling with late September activity. Leaves were beginning to turn golden, and the air carried that crisp promise of autumn that had always been my favorite season. "Just a bit tighter here," the seamstress murmured, her pins glinting as she worked. "We want it perfect for the big day." 4 months. I had 4 months until I walked down the aisle and became Mrs. Thomas Whitmore. 4 months until I sealed myself into the life I'd carefully constructed, the one that looked flawless from the outside, but felt increasingly like a beautifully decorated cage. My phone buzzed in my purse, and I glanced at my mother for permission before reaching for it. The message was from Thomas. "Meeting running late. Dinner at 8 instead of 7. Love you." I typed back a quick response, my fingers moving automatically across the screen. Everything with Thomas was automatic now. Comfortable. Safe. Exactly what I'd wanted when I'd said yes to his proposal at that charity gala 2 years ago, in front of 500 witnesses, and a string quartet playing Vivaldi. "All done," the seamstress announced, stepping back to admire her work. "You can change now. We'll have this ready for your final fitting in 3 months." As I carefully removed the dress in the privacy of the fitting room, I caught sight of my own eyes in the mirror. They looked tired, almost resigned. I wondered when that had happened, when the spark had dimmed from something bright and dangerous to something merely pleasant. I knew exactly when. 5 years ago, the summer I turned 23, when I'd fled from Chicago to New York, running from a man whose presence had consumed me so completely that I'd been terrified of losing myself entirely. Dario. Even thinking his name made my pulse quicken, a Pavlovian response I'd never been able to shake despite years of trying. Dario Castellano, the man who'd shown me what it meant to feel truly alive, to burn so hot that self-preservation became a distant concern. The man whose world of shadows and power had ultimately sent me running, choosing safety over the kind of love that left marks. I dressed quickly in my usual work attire, a soft gray cashmere sweater and tailored black pants, slipping my feet into the ballet flats I'd kicked off earlier. My mother was settling the bill when my phone rang again. This time it was Rebecca, my business partner at the interior design firm we'd founded 3 years ago. "Elena, we have a situation," she said without preamble. "The Grayson project just fell through. They're going with another firm." I stepped outside onto the sidewalk, pressing the phone closer to my ear as a bus rumbled past. "What? Rebecca, we've been working on that proposal for months." I know. But there's something else. We have a new client inquiry. Huge project. Renovation of a private estate in Lake Forest. The pay would cover what we lost on Grayson and then some." Relief washed through me, followed quickly by professional curiosity. "That's wonderful. Who's the client?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough that I felt a prickle of unease crawl up my spine. "Rebecca?" "The client is Castellano Industries," she said carefully. "The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10. The sidewalk seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I reached out to steady myself against the brick wall of the boutique, my fingers pressing into the rough surface as my mother emerged behind me, her shopping bags rustling. "Elena, did you hear me?" "Yes," I managed, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "Yes, I heard you. Tomorrow at 10. Castellano Industries, his family's legitimate face, the network of businesses that fronted for the empire everyone knew about, but no one dared speak of openly. And if the meeting was happening, if they were requesting our firm specifically, it could only mean one thing. He knew I was here. He knew I was back in Chicago. And after 5 years of silence, he was making his move. "Are you okay?" my mother asked, touching my arm with concern. "You've gone pale." "I'm fine," I lied, the words automatic as breathing. "Just work stress. You know how it is." That evening, I sat across from Thomas at our usual table at Avec, the restaurant where we'd had our first date. He was talking about the wedding, about his latest case, about his mother's insistence on adding more people to the guest list. I nodded at appropriate intervals, smiled when expected, but my mind was elsewhere. 5 years ago, I'd been a different person. Fresh out of design school, hungry for experience, I'd accepted a summer internship in New York, working on a restoration project for a historic brownstone. The owner had been listed as a private trust, but everyone on the crew knew the truth. The building belonged to Dario Castellano, youngest son of the Castellano family, a man whose name carried weight in certain circles. I'd met him on my 3rd day there. He'd appeared in the afternoon heat, dressed in a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his dark hair slightly mussed from the wind. Our eyes had met across the gutted living room, and something had shifted in the air between us. Something electric and dangerous and utterly irresistible. What started as professional conversations about design choices and architectural details had evolved into late-night discussions over wine on the brownstone's roof, the city spreading out beneath us like a carpet of lights. He'd been intelligent, funny, surprisingly vulnerable when he let his guard down, and the chemistry between us had been undeniable, a pull so strong that fighting it had felt like fighting gravity itself. By the end of June, I was his, completely, irrevocably his. The way he looked at me made me feel like the only woman in the world. The way he touched me, with a mixture of possession and reverence, had awakened parts of myself I hadn't known existed. With him, I was bold, daring, provocative. I challenged him, matched his intensity with my own, spoke my mind without the careful politeness I used with everyone else. But with that intoxication had come the reality of his world. The phone calls he took in hushed Italian in the middle of the night. The men in dark suits who appeared without warning. The way people looked at him, a mixture of respect and fear that made my stomach turn. And finally, the night I'd overheard a conversation about a shipment and territory disputes, words that painted a picture I couldn't unsee. I'd fled the next morning, leaving nothing but a note. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." 4 words to end the most intense 3 months of my life. "Elena? Earth to Elena?" Thomas was waving his hand in front of my face, amusement in his blue eyes. "You've been staring at that wine glass for 5 minutes." "Sorry," I said, shaking off the memories. "Long day. Tell me more about the guest list situation." He launched back into his story, and I let his voice wash over me, a comfortable drone that required nothing from me but occasional acknowledgement. This was my life now. Safe, predictable, exactly what I'd chosen when I'd returned to Chicago 3 years ago, determined to build something stable, something that wouldn't consume me whole. But as I lay in bed that night, Thomas sleeping soundly beside me in the apartment we'd recently moved into together, I couldn't stop my mind from wandering. Tomorrow I would walk into that meeting, and there was a very real possibility that Dario would be there, that after 5 years of silence, of rebuilding myself into someone controlled and careful, I would have to face the man who still haunted my dreams. I turned onto my side, watching the play of streetlight through the curtains. and wondered if I was strong enough to remain the person I'd become, or if one look from him would shatter the careful walls I'd built. The answer, I suspected, would come soon enough. The offices of Castellano Industries occupied the top 3 floors of a steel and glass tower in the Loop, the kind of building that announced wealth and power in architectural form. I stood on the sidewalk outside at 9:45, clutching my portfolio case and trying to steady my breathing. Rebecca walked beside me, oblivious to my internal turmoil, chattering about the scope of the project and the potential for future work. "This could really put us on the map," she was saying as we entered the lobby. "Elite clients like this, word spreads. We could be designing for all the Lake Forest families by next year." I nodded mutely, my heels clicking against the marble floor as we approached the security desk. The guard made a phone call, checked our IDs, and directed us to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. As the doors closed and we began our ascent, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a tailored navy dress that hit just below the knee, professional but not severe. My blonde hair was pulled back in a low chignon, small pearl earrings in my ears, minimal makeup that emphasized my hazel eyes, the armor of respectability, the uniform of the life I'd chosen. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that took my breath away, despite my best efforts to remain unaffected. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city and the lake beyond. The furniture was mid-century modern, museum quality, arranged with an eye for both aesthetics and power dynamics. Everything in the space communicated one message. The people who worked here played at a different level. A woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in Chanel, rose from behind a glass desk. "Ms. Reyes? Ms. Chen? Welcome. Mr. Castellano is expecting you. Follow me, please." My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd prepared myself for the possibility of seeing him, but the confirmation made my hands tremble slightly. I gripped my portfolio tighter, using the weight to ground myself. We walked down a corridor lined with original artwork, passing several closed doors before the woman stopped before a set of double doors in dark wood. She knocked once, then opened them, stepping aside to allow us entry. The office beyond was a study in controlled elegance. More windows, more views, but also bookshelves filled with volumes in multiple languages, a sitting area with Italian leather furniture, and a massive desk of dark walnut that commanded the space. Behind that desk, rising from his chair as we entered, was Dario. 5 years had only refined what had already been devastating. He was taller than I remembered, or perhaps it was just the force of his presence in the space. His dark hair was shorter now, professionally styled, but I could still see the slight wave that I'd once run my fingers through. The sharp planes of his face, the strong jaw, the full mouth that I'd tasted more times than I could count, all exactly as I remembered, but harder somehow, more defined. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin, a white shirt open at the collar, no tie. His eyes, dark brown and intense, met mine across the room, and the air between us seemed to crackle with recognition. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. I saw surprise flicker across his features, quickly masked, but not before I caught it. He hadn't known. He hadn't known I was the designer coming to this meeting. "Ms. Reyes," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered, that slight Italian accent curling around the syllables. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Rebecca moved forward immediately, extending her hand, launching into professional pleasantries. I followed more slowly, my legs feeling unsteady as I crossed the carpet. When I took his offered hand, the contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. His fingers closed around mine, warm and firm, and his thumb brushed almost imperceptibly across my knuckles before he released me. "Elena," he said quietly, "just for me. It's been a long time." "Mr. Castellano," I replied, my voice remarkably steady. "Yes, it has." Something flashed in his eyes at my formality. Amusement? Irritation? With Dario, it was always hard to tell what lay beneath the surface. We settled into the leather chairs arranged before his desk, Rebecca immediately pulling out her tablet to display our portfolio. But Dario's attention was fixed on me, his gaze traveling over my face, as if cataloging every change time had wrought. "I understand you're looking for an interior design firm for a property renovation," Rebecca began, swiping through images of our previous work. "We've done extensive work in historic preservation and luxury residential design. Our approach is to honor the original architecture while incorporating modern amenities and the client's personal aesthetic." "I'm familiar with your work," Dario said, though his eyes never left mine. "That's why I specifically requested this meeting." Rebecca preened at what she took as a compliment. I knew better. This meeting wasn't about interior design. It was about something else entirely. "The property in question is my family's estate in Lake Forest," he continued, finally turning his attention to Rebecca. "It was built in 1920, Italian villa style, overlooking the lake. My father recently passed, and the house has fallen into some disrepair. I want it restored, not just to its former glory, but elevated beyond it." "I'm very sorry for your loss," Rebecca said sincerely. "We'd be honored to take on a project of this significance. Could you tell us more about your vision?" For the next hour, Dario outlined the scope of the work. The house was massive, with 24 rooms, a library, a ballroom, formal gardens, and a pool house. Every detail needed attention, from the plasterwork to the custom furniture. The budget, he mentioned almost casually, was essentially unlimited. Rebecca was in heaven, making notes, asking questions about timeline and access. I sat silently, contributing only when directly addressed, hyper-aware of every glance Dario sent my way. This was a mistake, I thought. I should excuse myself, claim a conflict of interest, send Rebecca with another partner from the firm. But I didn't. I sat there, professional and composed, while inside I felt like I was 19 again, meeting him for the first time, feeling that dangerous pull. "I'd like to schedule a site visit," Rebecca said finally. "See the space in person, get a feel for the architecture and light quality. Would sometime this week be possible?" "Thursday afternoon," Dario said immediately. "I'll arrange for lunch to be served. You can take your time exploring the property." "Perfect," Rebecca beamed. "We'll put together some initial concepts based on today's discussion and—" "Actually," Dario interrupted smoothly, "I'd like Elena to lead this project personally." Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, well, we usually work as a team, but certainly Elena could be the primary designer. She has an excellent eye for—" "I insist," Dario said, and though his tone remained pleasant, there was steel beneath it. "I want Elena. Only Elena, or I'll find another firm." The ultimatum hung in the air. Rebecca glanced at me, uncertainty in her expression. This was the biggest contract we'd ever been offered. Turning it down because of my personal discomfort would be professional suicide, and there was no way to explain to Rebecca why working with Dario Castellano was impossible for me without revealing a past I'd never discussed with anyone in my current life. "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice betraying nothing of the panic rising in my chest. "I'd be happy to serve as lead designer on the project." Dario's smile was slow and satisfied, like a predator who'd successfully cornered his prey. "Excellent. Then I'll see you Thursday, Elena. 2:00. Don't be late." After the meeting concluded and we were back in the elevator descending to the lobby, Rebecca practically vibrated with excitement. "Do you realize what this means? This project could set us up for years, and he specifically requested you. He must have seen something in our portfolio that resonated." "Yes," I murmured, watching the floor numbers decrease. "He must have." I didn't tell Thomas about the Castellano project. Not because I planned to keep it secret, I told myself, but because there was nothing to tell. It was just work, a professional assignment, no different from any other client. The lie sat heavy in my stomach as I went through the motions of my evening routine. Dinner at Thomas's parents' house, discussing wedding plans with his mother while his father talked about expanding the firm. I smiled and nodded and agreed to ivory roses instead of blush pink, while my mind replayed the moment Dario's hand had closed around mine, the heat in his eyes when he'd said my name. "You're quiet tonight, dear," Thomas's mother observed as we cleared the dessert plates. "Wedding stress getting to you?" "Just a new project at work," I said, the partial truth easier than a complete fabrication. "A big renovation. It's going to take up a lot of my time over the next few months." "Well, don't let it interfere with the wedding planning," she said, with a light laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We have so much to finalize, and Thomas needs you focused." Thomas needs you focused. Not what do you need, or how can we support your career? The words rankled in a way they hadn't before. Or maybe they always had, and I'd just been better at ignoring it. That night, lying in bed beside Thomas, I stared at the ceiling and let myself remember. Not the end, not the fear that had driven me away, but the beginning. The way Dario had looked at me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve. The conversations that had lasted until dawn, when we'd talked about everything from architecture to philosophy, to the books we'd loved as children. The way he'd challenged me, pushed me to defend my opinions, respected my intelligence even as he disagreed. With Dario, I'd been sharp, fierce, unafraid. I'd matched his intensity with my own, pushed back when he pushed, met his dark humor with wit that made him laugh in a way that sounded surprised, as if he wasn't used to being genuinely amused. I'd been more myself with him than I'd ever been with anyone else. And then I discovered the truth of his world. And fear had won. Thursday arrived faster than I wanted it to. I drove north along Lakeshore Drive, watching the city give way to suburbs, and then to the estates of Lake Forest, where old money built its fortresses. Rebecca had wanted to come, but I'd convinced her that an initial solo visit would be more efficient, allowing me to move through the space at my own pace without having to coordinate schedules. The truth was, I needed to face Dario alone. Whatever this was, whatever game he was playing by insisting on working with me, I needed to understand it without witnesses. The Castellano estate sat on 10 acres overlooking Lake Michigan, hidden from the road by towering oaks and a high stone wall. I pulled up to the gate and pressed the intercom button, my heart beating faster as I announced myself. The gate swung open silently, revealing a long driveway that curved through manicured grounds. The house itself took my breath away despite my best efforts to remain professionally detached. It was indeed Italian villa style, 3 stories of honey-colored stone with a red tile roof, arched windows, and a loggia wrapped around the lower level. Time and neglect had left their marks, crumbling mortar, overgrown gardens, paint peeling from shutters, but the bones were magnificent. I parked in the circular drive and gathered my things, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. Professional armor again today. A black pencil skirt, cream silk blouse, low heels. Hair down this time, a small concession to the informality of a site visit. I told myself the choice had nothing to do with the way Dario used to run his fingers through it. He was waiting on the front steps, dressed more casually than in his office. Dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. Somehow he looked even more dangerous like this, as if the business suit had been a constraint he'd shrugged off. "Elena," he said as I approached, my name a caress in his mouth. Punctual as always. "Mr. Castellano," I replied coolly, despite the way my pulse jumped at the sight of him. "Thank you for accommodating my schedule." "Dario," he corrected, moving closer. "We've known each other too long for formalities, don't you think?" I stepped past him toward the door, needing distance. I think formalities are exactly what this situation requires. Shall we tour the property? I felt rather than saw his smile behind me. Of course. After you. The interior was as breathtaking as the exterior. A grand foyer with a curved staircase, marble floors in a herringbone pattern, frescoed ceilings that needed restoration, but still showed traces of their former glory. As I moved through the rooms, making notes on my tablet, Dario followed a few steps behind, close enough that I was constantly aware of his presence. "The library needs the most work," he said, leading me down a corridor to a room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, most of them empty now. My father collected first editions. I want to restore this as a proper library, somewhere to preserve them. I ran my hand along one of the shelves, feeling the quality of the wood beneath layers of dust. Walnut? Yes, original to the house. Most of the built-ins are. They're beautiful. They just need proper care. I turned to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. "What?" "You," he said simply. "You're beautiful. You've always been beautiful, but there's something different now. Sadder." The observation was too accurate, too penetrating. I looked away, pretending to examine the ceiling molding. "We're here to discuss the house, not me." "Are we?" He moved closer, and I felt the heat of him behind me. "Because from where I'm standing, the house is the least interesting thing in this room." "Dario, don't." "Don't what?" "Don't acknowledge that you walked out of my life 5 years ago without any real explanation? Don't mention that I've thought about you every single day since? Don't admit that finding out you were back in Chicago and engaged to some insurance lawyer felt like a knife to the chest?" I spun to face him, anger flaring. "You know about Thomas." "I know everything about Thomas Whitmore. I know he graduated Harvard Law, works at his father's firm, plays golf every Saturday, and is about as exciting as watching paint dry." His eyes blazed. "I know you're supposed to marry him in 4 months, and I know that ring on your finger cost him 3 months' salary and looks like every other engagement ring at the country club." "You have no right." "I have every right," he interrupted, stepping closer still, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar, and spice, and something uniquely him. "You were mine, Elena. You think I don't have the right to know who's trying to take my place?" "I was never yours," I said, hating how breathless I sounded. "We had a summer, that's all. It ended." "You fled," he corrected. "There's a difference. Yes, I fled. Because I discovered what you really were, what your family did. I wouldn't be part of that world." Something dangerous flickered in his expression. "And yet, here you are, in my house, working for me. Funny how that worked out. This is different. This is business." "Is it?" He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "Because from where I'm standing, this feels personal." I jerked away from his touch, putting the width of the library between us. "Stop. Whatever game you're playing, whatever this is, it needs to stop. I have a life now, a good life. I'm getting married. To a man you don't love. You don't know that, don't I?" His voice gentled, became almost pitying. "I've seen you with him, Elena. Pictures from your engagement party, charity events, all over his family's social media. You smile at him the way people smile at their dentist, polite, pleasant, utterly devoid of genuine emotion. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true." He moved around the library's perimeter, closing the distance between us with predatory patience. "Do you know what else I know? I know that the Elena I fell in love with wouldn't be caught dead at a country club function. The real Elena. The one who argued with me about Caravaggio at 3 a.m, who wasn't afraid to tell me when I was being an arrogant ass, who looked at me like I was the most fascinating person she'd ever met. She's still in there somewhere. I can see her when you think I'm not looking. That Elena made a mistake, I said, my voice shaking. She got involved with someone dangerous, someone whose world she couldn't navigate. She learned better. Or she got scared and ran away and has been hiding ever since. The accusation stung because it was true. I had been hiding, building a life so safe and predictable that nothing could hurt me again. Thomas was that safety, solid and boring and completely non-threatening. Our life together would be comfortable, stable, utterly absent of the consuming passion that had nearly destroyed me. I'm not hiding, I said weakly. I'm being smart. You're dying, Dario countered, his voice harsh now. You're choosing a slow death over taking a risk at really living, and when you walk down that aisle in 4 months, you'll seal yourself into a tomb of your own making. Better a tomb than a crime scene, I shot back. Your world is violent, Dario. People die. I heard things that summer, saw things that had nothing to do with you. Things I kept you carefully separate from. But they existed. They were real. And they always would be, hanging over us like a sword. I couldn't live like that. I won't. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then unexpectedly, he nodded. You're right. My world is violent. It's complicated and messy and sometimes terrible. But it's also real, Elena. More real than whatever sanitized fantasy you're building with Thomas. At least with Thomas, I know I'll be safe. Safe, he repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. Is that really what you want? To be safe and bored and half alive? I didn't answer, couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. This argument, this entire situation, was happening because some part of me, the part I'd buried deepest, was still drawn to him like a moth to flame, unable to resist even knowing I'd get burned. We stood in the dusty library, the afternoon light slanting through the dirty windows, and I felt the foundation of my carefully constructed life beginning to crack. 4 months. I had 4 months until I married Thomas, until I made the safe choice permanent. 4 months of working with Dario, of being in close proximity to the one man who'd ever made me feel truly alive. 4 months to prove I was strong enough to resist him. Looking at him now, seeing the determination in his eyes, I wasn't sure I was. The site visit lasted another 2 hours, but the tension from our confrontation in the library colored every interaction. Dario was the perfect professional, pointing out architectural details, discussing his vision for each space, but underneath the civility was a current of something darker, more charged. We finished in the primary bedroom, a massive space with French doors leading to a balcony overlooking the lake. The view was spectacular, and I found myself drawn to the windows, imagining how the morning light would flood the room, how the sound of waves would drift in on summer evenings. My mother loved this room, Dario said from behind me. She used to sit on that balcony and read for hours. After she died, my father couldn't bear to enter it. That's why it's in such disrepair. I turned to find him closer than I'd realized, his expression softer than I'd seen it since our reunion. I'm sorry. I didn't know about your mother. 10 years ago. Cancer. He moved to stand beside me at the window, both of us staring out at the gray-blue expanse of lake. She would have liked you. She always said I needed someone who wasn't afraid to challenge me. Dario. I know. This is business. You're engaged. I'm not supposed to say these things. He glanced at me, and I saw pain in his eyes, genuine pain that made my chest tighten. But I can't pretend, Elena. Not with you. I never could. What do you want from me? The question came out more vulnerable than I'd intended. Why bring me here? Why insist on working with me? Because when I found out you were back in Chicago, that you were getting married, I realized I had one last chance, one opportunity to show you that what we had wasn't just some summer fling you can bury and forget. It was 5 years ago, and I've never forgotten a single moment of it. He turned to face me fully, his intensity almost overwhelming in the intimate space of the bedroom. Have you forgotten? I wanted to lie, to tell him that I'd moved on completely, that Thomas had erased every memory of what we'd shared. But standing here, in this beautiful wreck of a house that needed saving, looking into the eyes of the man who'd once known every secret thought in my head, I couldn't. No, I whispered. I haven't forgotten. Triumph flashed across his face, but he didn't move closer, didn't push his advantage. Then work with me on this house. Give me these next few months. Let me show you that I'm not just the man you ran from, that there's more to my life than what scared you away. And if I still choose Thomas? Pain flickered in his eyes, but he nodded. Then I'll let you go. You'll never hear from me again. But if there's even a chance, Elena, even the smallest possibility that we could have what we started to build that summer, don't you owe it to both of us to explore it? Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to refuse, to find a reason to exit this project, to run again just as I had 5 years ago. But another part, the part that had been slowly suffocating in the careful prison of my engagement, whispered yes. 4 months, I said finally. I'll lead the project through completion. But that's all this is, Dario. Professional. Nothing more. Of course, he agreed. But the satisfaction in his smile told me he knew better. Nothing more. As I drove back to the city that evening, the setting sun painting the lake in shades of gold and amber, I felt the careful balance of my life tilting. Thomas would be waiting at home, ready to discuss last-minute changes to the wedding invitation wording, blissfully unaware that his fiancée had just spent 3 hours in emotional combat with her ex-lover. The guilt should have been crushing. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. I felt awake. Over the next 3 weeks, I threw myself into the Castellano project, with an intensity that surprised even Rebecca. I created mood boards, sourced materials, spent hours researching period-appropriate fixtures and furniture. On the surface, it was professional diligence. In reality, it was self-preservation. If I stayed busy enough, I could avoid thinking about what I was really doing, about the line I was dancing along. The trouble was, the project required constant consultation with Dario, site visits, material approval meetings, discussions about finishes and furniture placement. Each interaction was professionally appropriate, and yet charged with an undercurrent that left me drained and exhilarated in equal measure. He was different than I remembered, I realized. More controlled, more deliberate in his words and actions. The passionate intensity was still there, but banked now, channeled into something more mature and somehow more dangerous. This wasn't the 29-year-old man I'd known in New York, burning through life with barely contained energy. This was someone who'd learned patience, who understood that some things were worth waiting for. And he was waiting for me. I could feel it in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, in the carefully casual touches that shouldn't have meant anything, but somehow meant everything. Meanwhile, my relationship with Thomas began to show cracks. He noticed my distraction, complained about the time I was spending on the Lake Forest project, suggested I delegate more to Rebecca. "It's just a house renovation, Elena," he said one evening, frustration creeping into his usually placid tone. "You're acting like it's the Sistine Chapel." "It's the biggest project our firm has ever handled," I countered, not mentioning that Dario had recommended us to 2 other wealthy families, bringing in business that would secure our company for years. "It matters." "More than us?" More than the wedding? Don't be dramatic, Thomas. I'm not being dramatic, he insisted, his voice rising slightly, a rare occurrence for him. You're different, Elena. Ever since you started working with these Castellano people. You're distant, distracted. You barely touch me anymore. The accusation stung because it was true. I'd been avoiding intimacy with Thomas, making excuses about stress and wedding planning, unable to reconcile sleeping with him while my thoughts were consumed by Dario. I'm sorry, I said. And I meant it. Thomas didn't deserve to be collateral damage in whatever game Dario and I were playing. You're right. I've been letting work consume me. I'll do better. He pulled me into his arms, and I let him, trying to find comfort in the familiar embrace. But even as Thomas held me, I couldn't help comparing. His touch was gentle, respectful, completely without the electricity that sparked whenever Dario's hand brushed mine. The breaking point came in late October, at a benefit gala for Thomas's law firm. I dressed carefully in a pale gold gown, elegant and appropriate for a soon-to-be law firm wife. Thomas was proud, I could tell, introducing me to partners and clients, his hand possessive at my waist. And then Dario walked in. He cut through the crowd like a knife, devastating in a tuxedo that made every other man in the room look diminished. He wasn't alone. On his arm was a stunning brunette in crimson, someone I vaguely recognized from society pages. I felt a stab of something that I absolutely refused to identify as jealousy. Our eyes met across the ballroom, and I saw surprise in his expression. He hadn't known I would be here. This wasn't a planned encounter, wasn't part of whatever strategy he'd been employing. For the first time in weeks, we were meeting on neutral ground. Thomas, oblivious to the sudden tension, smiled and waved. Isn't that Castellano? The client you've been working with? We should say hello. Before I could invent a reason not to, he was steering me across the room, right toward the man who'd been consuming my thoughts. Dario's date said something to him, and he nodded absently, his attention fixed on me. Castellano, Thomas greeted warmly, extending his hand. Thomas Whitmore. I don't think we've met, but I've heard so much about your renovation project from Elena. Whitmore, Dario replied, his grip firm as they shook hands. His eyes slid to me. Your fiancé is extraordinarily talented. You're a lucky man. Don't I know it? Thomas beamed, completely missing the undercurrent in Dario's tone. Elena's been practically living at your estate. I'm beginning to think she prefers it to our apartment. It's a beautiful property, Dario said smoothly. Requires considerable attention to detail. Elena has been invaluable in restoring it to what it should be. The conversation continued, superficially pleasant, while I stood frozen between them, hyper-aware of every glance Dario sent my way, every deliberate word choice that carried double meaning only I would catch. His date, growing bored, excused herself to visit the ladies' room. Thomas, spotting one of his senior partners, did the same. I'll just be a minute, darling. Need to discuss the Henderson case. And then Dario and I were alone in the crowded room, surrounded by people but existing in a bubble of tension so thick it was almost visible. You look beautiful tonight, he said quietly, his gaze traveling over me in a way that made my skin heat. Though I prefer you with your hair down. Don't, I whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Not here. Where then? You've been avoiding me, Elena, using our meetings as an excuse to keep things purely professional. I'm beginning to think you're afraid. I'm not afraid. No? He stepped closer, just inside the boundaries of propriety, close enough that I could see the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Then prove it. Have dinner with me. Just the two of us, away from the house, away from your fiancé. One meal. I can't. Can't or won't. Both, I said, frustration bleeding into my voice. What do you think will happen, Dario? We'll have dinner, rekindle old flames, and I'll what? Leave Thomas 4 months before our wedding? Blow up my entire life? Would that be such a terrible thing? Blowing up a life that's clearly making you miserable? I'm not miserable. You're not happy either. I can see it in your eyes, feel it in the way you hold yourself, like you're afraid to take up too much space, to be too much of anything. His words hit too close to home. With Thomas, I was careful, measured, pleasant. I shaped myself to fit his expectations, his family's expectations, the social circle we moved in. The sharp, fierce Elena that Dario remembered had been filed down to smooth edges. That's who I am now, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. That's who you pretend to be. He reached out as if to touch my face, then seemed to remember where we were and lowered his hand. The real Elena, the woman I fell in love with. She's still there. I see her when you talk about the house, about your design choices, when you think no one's watching and your guard drops. She's in there, suffocating. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Tell me something, Elena. When was the last time you laughed? Really laughed, not that polite little sound you make when Thomas tells one of his golf stories. When was the last time you felt anything that made your heart race, made you feel alive? I couldn't answer, because the truth was devastating. The only time my heart raced anymore was when I was around him. Thomas reappeared, breaking the moment, his arms slipping around my waist as he rejoined the conversation. Dario's date returned as well, and the four of us made small talk for another few minutes before Dario made their excuses to leave. I'll see you Thursday at the estate, he said to me, his eyes holding mine. We need to finalize the library built-ins. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and watched him walk away, his date's hand on his arm, while Thomas chatted obliviously beside me about something that required an answer I didn't hear. That night, I dreamed of Dario for the first time in years. We were in the New York brownstone, in the early days when everything was new and exhilarating. He was showing me how to install crown molding, standing behind me, his hands guiding mine, his breath warm against my ear. When I turned in his arms, his kiss was fire, consuming everything in its path. I woke gasping, Thomas's arm heavy across my waist, the digital clock reading 3:47 a.m. In the darkness, I finally admitted the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. I was in trouble. Deep, irrevocable trouble. And I had less than 4 months to decide whether to save myself or let myself burn. November arrived with cold that cut to the bone, and with it, an unwelcome complication. Thomas's mother, Elizabeth Whitmore, decided that we needed to have an engagement dinner at the Castellano estate. It would be perfect, she gushed over lunch at her club, while I picked at a Cobb salad I had no appetite for. You've been working so hard on that house and everyone is dying to see it. We could show it off, even in its unfinished state, and it would be the talk of the season. My stomach dropped. The house isn't ready for guests. Most of the rooms are still under construction. Nonsense. From what Thomas says, the main floor is nearly complete. The library, the ballroom, the formal dining room, those are all we need. And Mr. Castellano owns the property. I'm sure he'd be delighted to host. The word delighted was the last thing I'd use to describe how Dario would feel about this proposal. And yet, when Elizabeth called him later that day to extend the invitation, he accepted with what she described as gracious enthusiasm. I knew better. This was another move in his chess game, another opportunity to pull me deeper into his orbit. It's in 3 weeks, Thomas told me that evening, reviewing the calendar. A Friday night, black tie. My parents are inviting 50 people, business associates, family, close friends. This is going to be perfect, Elena. everyone in one place, the house you're working on as the backdrop. It's like showing off both my brilliant fiancé and my family's social connections at once. The complete misunderstanding of what this dinner would be, the dangerous proximity of my two worlds colliding, made me want to laugh hysterically. But I smiled and nodded, and pretended that hosting a party for my fiancé's family at my ex-lover's estate was a perfectly normal thing to do. The 3 weeks before the dinner passed in a blur of preparation. I coordinated with caterers, florists, and Dario's household staff, all while trying to avoid extended one-on-one time with the man himself. He seemed amused by my attempts at distance, finding reasons to consult with me privately about details that his staff could have easily handled. The evening of the party, I arrived early to oversee final arrangements. The house had been transformed. Candles everywhere, flowers from floor arrangements to ceiling installations, the newly refinished floors gleaming, the restored plasterwork and paint making the spaces glow. Dario found me in the ballroom, adjusting the placement of a flower arrangement. He'd dressed for the evening in a tuxedo that should have been illegal, his hair slightly damp as if he'd just showered. "It's perfect," he said, his voice carrying across the empty space. "You've brought this house back to life." I turned to find him watching me with an expression that made my breath catch. It was always beautiful. It just needed attention. "Some things are like that," he said, moving closer. "Beautiful things that need the right kind of attention to fully bloom." "Dario." "I know. Not appropriate. Not tonight." He stopped a few feet away, close, but not touching. "But after tonight, Elena, after you host this party here with your fiancé, playing the role of his perfect future wife in the house that you and I have created together, you're going to have to make a choice." "What do you mean?" "I mean that watching you tonight, pretending with him, smiling at his family while your eyes say something completely different, it's going to break something in me. So after tonight, I'm going to ask you one question, and your answer will determine everything." Before I could respond, voices echoed from the foyer. The first guests were arriving. The dinner was exquisite torture. I moved through the rooms, playing hostess alongside Thomas, accepting compliments on the renovation while hyper-aware of Dario's presence. He was the perfect host, charming and gracious, giving no indication of the tension between us. To everyone else, we were simply designer and client, professional associates at a social gathering. But I felt his eyes on me all night. When I laughed at something one of Thomas's colleagues said, when Thomas's arm went around my waist, when Elizabeth Whitmore showed everyone my engagement ring, cooing about the wedding plans. During dinner, I was seated between Thomas and his father, directly across from Dario. The conversation flowed around me. Business, politics, society gossip, while I picked at my food and tried not to meet Dario's gaze. "Elena designed this room specifically for entertaining," Thomas was saying proudly to the table. "She has such an eye for these things. The chandelier alone took her 3 weeks to source." "She's certainly talented," Dario agreed, his voice neutral. "Tell me, Thomas, does Elena always work this obsessively? She practically lived here for the past 2 months." "Oh, yes," Thomas laughed, oblivious to the edge in the question. "I barely saw her some weeks. But that's the price of excellence, right? And the result speaks for itself." "Indeed it does," Dario murmured, his eyes finally meeting mine across the table. "The result speaks volumes." After dinner, guests dispersed to explore the house, admire the restoration, network over cocktails in the library. I excused myself to the powder room, needing a moment away from the performative nature of the evening. I was touching up my lipstick when Dario's reflection appeared behind mine in the mirror. "You shouldn't be in here," I said, not turning around. "No one saw me follow you." He leaned against the closed door, blocking my exit. "Have you been happy tonight? Playing the perfect fiancé, accepting congratulations on a wedding that looks more like a business merger than a celebration of love. Stop it. Why? Why do you keep pretending, Elena? Everyone in that dining room could see it. The way you flinched when Thomas touched you. The way your smile never reached your eyes. The way you looked anywhere but at me because you knew if our eyes met, everyone would know. Know what? I turned to face him, anger and frustration boiling over. That I made a mistake 5 years ago. That I ran away from something real because I was scared. That I've spent these years building a safe, acceptable life only to have you waltz back in and tear it all down. Yes, he said simply. All of that. And that you're about to make an even bigger mistake by marrying a man you don't love because he represents safety. Maybe safety is enough. It's not. Not for you. Not for someone who used to look at me like I hung the moon. Who challenged me and excited me and made me feel truly seen for the first time in my life. His voice dropped, became almost gentle. You're burying yourself alive, Elena, and I can't stand by and watch it happen. Then look away, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. Walk away, Dario. Let me make my own choices, even if you think they're mistakes. I can't. He moved closer, and I backed against the vanity, trapped between marble and memory. I tried. For 5 years, I tried to forget you, to move on, to tell myself that if you wanted to leave, I should let you go. But then I saw you again, and everything came rushing back. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment of perfect understanding. You're it for me, Elena. You always have been. This isn't fair. No, he agreed. It's not. But neither is watching you sacrifice yourself on the altar of respectability. So, I'm asking you now, before you walk back out there to your fiancé, before this charade continues any longer, do you love him? Thomas, do you love him the way you loved me? The question hung between us, inescapable. I opened my mouth to say yes, to lie, to protect the life I'd built. But standing here, in this beautiful house we'd restored together, looking into the eyes of the only man who'd ever truly known me, the lie wouldn't come. No, I whispered. No, I don't. Triumph and pain warred in his expression. He raised his hand, his fingers grazing my cheek in the gentlest touch. Then don't marry him. Don't go through with it. We'll figure out the rest. My world, your fears, all of it. But don't throw away what we could have because you're afraid. I have to go, I said, ducking under his arm and yanking open the door. People will notice I'm gone. I fled back to the party, back to Thomas's side, but everything had shifted. I made it through the rest of the evening on autopilot, smiling and thanking guests for coming while inside I crumbled. When we finally left, Thomas tipsy and happy, talking about what a success the evening had been, I looked back at the house. Dario stood in the doorway, watching us drive away, his expression unreadable in the distance. 3 months. I had 3 months until the wedding, and I had no idea what I was going to do. The week after the dinner party, I avoided Dario's calls. 7 in 3 days, each one ignored, each voicemail deleted without listening. I threw myself into wedding planning with Elizabeth Whitmore, selecting table linens and tasting cakes and pretending that everything was fine, that my carefully constructed life wasn't falling apart at the seams. Thomas noticed my distraction, but attributed it to wedding stress. You're working too hard, darling, he said one evening, rubbing my shoulders while I stared at fabric swatches without really seeing them. Maybe you should take a break from the Castellano project. You've done the heavy lifting. Let Rebecca handle the final details. The suggestion should have been welcome, an escape from the constant proximity to Dario that was slowly destroying my resolve. Instead, I felt panic at the thought of stepping away, of not seeing him, of cutting that last thread that connected us. "I can't," I said. "We're too close to completion. It would be unprofessional." Thomas sighed but didn't argue. He never argued, I realized. He accepted, accommodated, yielded. It was one of the things that had initially attracted me to him. His easygoing nature, his lack of demands. Now it felt like indifference, as if he didn't care enough about me to fight for my attention. The fourth day after the party, Dario stopped calling. Instead, a courier arrived at my office with a package. Inside was a leather-bound book, old and clearly valuable, with a note in his distinctive handwriting. "Elena, I found this in my father's library. First edition Dante, Inferno, page 47. D." My hands trembled as I opened to the marked page. There, in the original Italian, was the passage about Paolo and Francesca, the doomed lovers swept into hell for their adultery, forever bound together in their punishment. Dario had underlined one phrase and translated it in the margin. "Love, which permits no loved one not to love." I closed the book and pressed it against my chest, my heart hammering. This was his answer to my avoidance, a reminder that what we felt wasn't something either of us could simply choose to stop feeling. Love, the line suggested, compelled reciprocation. It wasn't a choice, but a force, inevitable as gravity. Rebecca noticed the book when she came into my office to discuss a new client inquiry. "Nice," she said, admiring the binding. "Antique?" "A gift," I said vaguely, "from a client." Her eyebrows rose. "Must be some client. That looks expensive." "He's grateful for the work we've done on his estate." But Rebecca was too perceptive, and she'd known me too long. "Elena," she said carefully, sitting across from my desk, "are you okay? And I don't mean in the general wedding stress way everyone keeps assuming. I mean really okay." The concern in her voice, the genuine friendship behind the question, nearly undid me. Rebecca and I had built our business from nothing, had supported each other through long nights and difficult clients, and all the challenges of being young women trying to make it in a competitive field. She deserved honesty. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought I'd figured out how to be happy. But now everything's confused and I don't know what's real anymore." "This is about Castellano, isn't it?" At my startled expression, she gave me a sad smile. "I'm not blind, Elena. I've seen the way you two look at each other when you think no one's watching. The way you light up when he calls, then immediately shut it down. The way you've been different these past 2 months. More alive somehow, but also more conflicted. I'm not judging," she interrupted gently. "But you're getting married in 3 months. Whatever this is, you need to figure it out before you walk down that aisle. It's not fair to Thomas, and it's not fair to you." She left me alone with that observation and the book of Dante, and I knew she was right. I couldn't keep existing in this limbo, caught between the life I'd chosen and the life I'd fled from. I needed to make a decision. That evening, I finally listened to Dario's voicemails. Each one was brief, his voice controlled but carrying an edge of desperation that grew with each message. "Elena, we need to talk. Call me. I know you're avoiding me. I understand why, but it doesn't change what I said. Call me. The house is nearly finished. We need to discuss final details, and we need to talk about us. Elena, please, don't shut me out. Not again." The last message was different, his voice rough as if he'd been drinking. "I lied when I said I'd let you go if you still chose him. I can't. I won't. You can marry Thomas if that's what you really want. But I'll spend the rest of my life knowing you settled for safety instead of love, and that will haunt me until I die. So, before you make that choice, before you commit to a life of pleasant numbness, meet me one more time. Let me remind you what it feels like to really live. I sat in my car in the parking garage beneath our apartment building, Thomas waiting upstairs with takeout from my favorite Thai place, and I pressed the callback button before I could think better of it. Dario answered on the first ring. Elena. I got your messages, I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. And the book. Page 47, he said. Tell me you understand. I understand that you're comparing us to doomed lovers from Dante's Inferno. That's not exactly encouraging. They were damned for adultery, he agreed. But they were also immortalized for the strength of their love. Given the choice between heaven without each other and hell together, they chose each other. Every single time, they chose each other. That's not romantic, Dario. That's tragic. Is it? Or is it the only honest response to real love? Acknowledging that some connections transcend logic and safety and the expectations of the world. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the seat. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let me go? Because you don't want me to. His voice gentled. If you truly wanted me to leave you alone, you would have called off the Castellano project weeks ago. You would have blocked my number, returned the book, built walls I couldn't scale. But you didn't. You're still here, still holding on to this thread between us because you feel it too. The impossibility of really letting go. Feeling something and acting on it are different things. Are they? Elena, meet me tomorrow. One dinner, just the two of us. If after that, you still want to marry Thomas, if you can look me in the eye and tell me you choose him, I'll back away. I'll finish the house through intermediaries. I'll stay out of your life. But give me one evening to remind you of what we had, of what we could have again. Every rational thought screamed at me to refuse. Meeting him privately, especially now when my emotions were so raw, was reckless and dangerous. It was a betrayal of Thomas, of the life I'd committed to, of everything I'd built over the past 5 years. But I couldn't say no. Some traitorous part of me, the part that came alive only around Dario, was already agreeing. One dinner, I heard myself say, but not in public. I can't risk being seen. The estate, he said immediately. Tomorrow night, I'll cook. The intimacy of that suggestion, Dario cooking for me in the house we'd restored together, made my stomach flip. But I'd already committed. 7 o'clock, I agreed. And Dario? This doesn't mean anything. It's just closure. Of course, he said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. Just closure. I ended the call and sat in the darkness of the parking garage for another 10 minutes, trying to compose myself before facing Thomas. When I finally went upstairs, he was waiting with pad thai and spring rolls, completely oblivious to the fact that his fiancée had just agreed to a private dinner with another man. There you are, he said cheerfully. I was about to send a search party. Everything okay? Fine, I lied, accepting the kiss he pressed to my forehead. Just a long day. We ate dinner in front of the television, Thomas watching a basketball game while I pushed noodles around my plate and wondered what I was doing, what I was risking, what irreversible step I was about to take. That night, I lay awake beside Thomas, listening to his steady breathing while my mind raced. 24 hours from now, I would be with Dario. Alone in that beautiful house, with no buffer of professionalism or witnesses or wedding planning to hide behind. Just the two of us, and the truth we'd been dancing around for months. I should cancel. I should call him in the morning and tell him I'd made a mistake. That dinner was a terrible idea, that I needed to focus on my upcoming marriage. But I knew I wouldn't. Because Rebecca was right. I needed to figure this out before I walked down that aisle. And the only way to know if what I felt for Dario was real, or just the lingering echo of an old passion, was to face it directly, without the armor of denial I'd been hiding behind. Tomorrow night, I would have my answer. Tomorrow night, everything would change. I told Thomas I had a late client meeting, hating myself for the ease with which the lie came. He barely looked up from his laptop, absorbed in case files for a trial the following week. "Don't work too late," he said absently. "My mother wants us for brunch on Sunday to finalize the seating chart." "I'll be home by 11, I promised, another lie to add to the growing collection. I drove north as the winter sun set early, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The Castellano estate looked different at twilight, softer somehow, the warm light from windows making it appear more like a home than a showpiece. I'd spent so many hours here over the past months, but always during the day, always with staff present, always maintaining professional distance. Tonight was different. Dario opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been watching for my arrival. He'd dressed casually, dark jeans and a black sweater, but somehow looked more devastating than in any of his tailored suits. His hair was slightly mussed, and there was something in his eyes, anticipation mixed with vulnerability, that made my resolve waver. "You came," he said softly. "I said I would. I wasn't sure you'd actually go through with it." He stepped aside, allowing me entry. "I'm glad you did." The house smelled incredible, garlic and herbs and something rich simmering. "You actually cooked?" "I told you I would. Surprised?" "A little," I admitted. "I remember you ordering in constantly that summer in New York. I've learned a few things in 5 years." He took my coat, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange, sending that familiar electricity through my system. "Come, everything's almost ready." He led me not to the formal dining room we'd restored, but to the kitchen, a massive space with professional appliances and a large island. 2 places were set at the island, intimate and casual, wine already poured. "I thought formal dining room would be too much pressure," he explained, reading my expression. "Too much like the engagement party. This feels more like us. Us. As if we were still in us. As if 5 years and an engagement hadn't happened." But as I watched him move around the kitchen with surprising competence, plating fresh pasta with a sauce that smelled divine, I found myself relaxing into the moment. This wasn't Dario, the dangerous crime boss, or Dario, the wealthy businessman. This was the man I'd fallen in love with that summer. Intelligent, funny, surprisingly domestic when he wanted to be. "Cacio e pepe," he announced, setting a plate before me. "My grandmother's recipe. She taught me when I was 8 years old." I took a bite and couldn't suppress a small moan of pleasure. This is incredible. Food made with the right motivation usually is. He settled onto the stool beside me, closer than strictly necessary. I wanted tonight to be perfect. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the ease between us both comforting and dangerous. This was what I'd been avoiding, the realization that Dario and I had always fit together in a way that transcended logic, that made being with him feel like coming home. "Tell me about the past 5 years," he said eventually. "What you've been doing, how you built your business. I want to know everything." So I told him. About meeting Rebecca in a continuing education class, about the risk of starting our own firm, about the long hours and difficult clients and small victories that had eventually built into something sustainable. About moving back to Chicago and reconnecting with old friends. About meeting Thomas at a charity event his firm was sponsoring. "He asked you out at a charity event?" Dario's lip curled slightly. "Not everyone conducts their courtship while renovating brownstones," I said, but without heat. "No, but everyone should. It's a much better test of compatibility. You see how someone handles stress, makes decisions under pressure, compromises when visions don't align." Is that what the past 2 months have been? A test? Partly, he admitted. I needed to see if what we had was real, or just memory making it better than it was. If we could still work together, still challenge each other, still find that rhythm we had. And? His eyes met mine, intense in the kitchen's warm light. It's real, more real than I remembered. You've grown, Elena. You're more confident, more sure of your vision. But the essential you, the fierce intelligence and creative fire, that's all still there. And being around you these months has reminded me what it feels like to be truly engaged with someone, not just physically, but intellectually, creatively. No one else challenges me the way you do. Dario, let me finish. He set down his fork, turning to face me fully. That summer in New York, I fell in love with you. I know that's heavy to hear, but it's true. And when you left, when I found your note, I was devastated. But I also understood. My world scared you, and I couldn't blame you for that. It scares me sometimes too. Then why stay in it? Because it's not something you can just leave. My family, my obligations, they're not a job I can quit. They're part of who I am, for better or worse. He reached out, his fingers finding mine on the counter. But I've spent 5 years making changes, Elena. Shifting away from the parts of the business that are most dangerous, most morally compromised. Building legitimate operations that can eventually replace the rest. It's slow work, but it's happening. Why? Because of you, he said simply. Because even though you were gone, even though I thought I'd never see you again, you changed me. You made me want to be better, to build something I wouldn't be ashamed to share with someone like you. The confession hung between us, and I felt something crack in my chest. You can't put that on me. I didn't ask you to change. No, but you inspired it anyway. That's what love does, Elena. Real love. It makes you want to be worthy of the person you love. And Thomas? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What about him? What about him? Does he inspire you to be better? Does he challenge you, excite you, make you want to grow beyond who you are? Dario's thumb stroked across my knuckles. Or does he make you feel safe and comfortable and completely unchallenged? I wanted to defend Thomas, to list his qualities and make a case for the life we'd planned together. But the words wouldn't come, because Dario was right. Thomas was safe, but he didn't push me, didn't see the parts of myself I'd buried, didn't even know they existed. It's not fair to compare you two, I said finally. You're completely different people. Exactly. And you have to decide which kind of person you want to spend your life with. Someone who makes you feel safe, or someone who makes you feel alive? What if I want both? Then you're lying to yourself. His voice gentled. I know my world comes with risks. I know there will always be complications, things I can't fully protect you from. But I also know that when you're with me, you're fully yourself, not some tamed-down version designed to fit someone else's expectations. And I think you know it too. He was right, I realized with sudden clarity. These past months, working with him, sparring with him, rebuilding this house together, I'd felt more like myself than I had in years. The careful, pleasant Elena I'd become with Thomas was a performance, a role I'd stepped into because it seemed easier than being complicated and demanding and fully alive. I'm scared, I admitted. Of you. Of what you make me feel. Of the life you live. I know. And I'm not asking you to stop being scared. I'm just asking you to be brave enough to choose what you really want, instead of what feels safe. Before I could respond, before I could think through the implications, he leaned in and kissed me. It was like coming home and jumping off a cliff simultaneously, familiar and terrifying. Everything I remembered, and more. His lips were soft but insistent, his hand coming up to cup my face with such tenderness that I felt tears prick my eyes. When his tongue swept against mine, I heard myself make a sound that was half sob, half moan. 5 years dissolved. I was 23 again, consumed by passion that eclipsed everything else, feeling more alive in this single moment than in all the months of my engagement. I kissed him back with everything I had, years of suppressed longing pouring into the contact. My hands found his hair, pulling him closer, needing to eliminate any space between us. He responded by lifting me onto the counter, stepping between my legs, his hands spanning my waist as the kiss deepened. "Elena," he breathed against my mouth, and the way he said my name, like a prayer, like a curse, nearly undid me. Reality crashed back. I pulled away, gasping, my hand going to my lips as if I could contain what had just happened. I can't. I'm engaged. I'm supposed to marry Thomas in 3 months. "Do you want to marry him?" Dario asked, his voice rough. "After that kiss, can you honestly tell me you want to spend the rest of your life with someone else?" It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You either love him and want to be with him, or you don't. There's no middle ground. "There are consequences," I said desperately, sliding off the counter and putting distance between us. "His family, my family, all the planning, the deposits, the guests who've already made arrangements. Are you seriously telling me you're going to marry a man you don't love because it's too inconvenient to call off the wedding?" The way he phrased it made it sound absurd, but the weight of social expectation, of disappointing people, of admitting I'd been wrong, it was crushing. "You don't understand. My parents barely speak to me as it is. Thomas's family has been so welcoming, so kind. Breaking this engagement would hurt so many people. And marrying him would hurt you," Dario interrupted. "Every single day of your life you'd be hurting yourself, suffocating the parts of yourself that don't fit his neat little picture of what a wife should be. Is that really better?" I couldn't answer because I didn't have an answer. Everything he was saying was true, but the practical realities of my life, the commitments I'd made, couldn't just be erased by a kiss, no matter how earth-shattering. "I need to go," I said, grabbing my coat from where he'd hung it. "This was a mistake. I never should have come. Elena, wait." But I was already moving toward the door, fleeing just as I had 5 years ago, running from feelings too big to contain, too dangerous to acknowledge. He caught me in the foyer, his hand on my arm spinning me around. "Don't do this again. Don't run away because you're scared." "I'm not running away. I'm being realistic. We can't just pick up where we left off, Dario. Too much has changed. Nothing important has changed," he insisted. "You still feel what I feel. That kiss proved it. A kiss doesn't erase reality. I have a life, commitments, a wedding planned. Then cancel it." His voice was urgent now, almost desperate. "Come with me instead. Stay tonight. Let me show you what we could have together." The temptation was overwhelming. To say yes, to let myself fall back into his orbit completely, to stop fighting the pull between us. But that way lay madness, the kind of consuming passion that had terrified me 5 years ago, that would eclipse everything else until I couldn't see straight. "No," I said, though it cost me everything. "I can't. I won't." I pulled free and ran to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. In the rearview mirror, I saw Dario standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, watching me leave him again. The drive back to the city was a blur of tears and recrimination. What had I done? I'd kissed another man while wearing Thomas's ring, had let Dario say things that made everything clear, had admitted to myself that I didn't love my fiancé the way I should. When I got home, Thomas was asleep. I slipped into bed beside him, careful not to wake him, and stared at the ceiling until dawn, my lips still tingling from Dario's kiss, my heart shattered into pieces I didn't know how to reassemble. The final 11 weeks before the wedding passed in a kind of fugue state. I threw myself into the last details with manic intensity, finalizing the menu, confirming the band, obsessing over centerpieces and favor bags, and every other minutia that went into planning a society wedding. If I stayed busy enough, I could almost avoid thinking about that night at the estate, about the kiss that had confirmed what I'd been trying to deny. I didn't return to the Castellano house. I assigned all remaining tasks to Rebecca and other team members, communicating with Dario's staff only through email. Dario himself didn't contact me. No calls, no messages, nothing. His silence was somehow worse than persistence would have been. It felt like acceptance, like he'd finally given up. The wedding dress hung in my closet like an accusation. I'd lost weight. Stress, I told my mother when she worried, though the truth was that food had lost all appeal. Thomas noticed my distraction, but attributed it to pre-wedding jitters, which I suppose it was, in a way. 2 weeks before the wedding, the Castellano project officially wrapped. Rebecca presented me with the final invoice and the client satisfaction survey, which Dario had filled out with impeccable professionalism. Exceptional work. Would recommend without reservation. As if I'd just been his designer, nothing more. We should celebrate, Rebecca said. This project made our reputation. Elite clients are already calling because of it. Sure, I agreed hollowly. That's great. She studied me with concern. Elena, are you okay? You've been different these past few weeks. More. Absent. Wedding stress, I said automatically. Is it? Or is it something else? I couldn't meet her eyes. I'm fine. Everything's fine. But nothing was fine. I was going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly like a prison, counting down to a wedding that felt more like a funeral. And the worst part was that I had no one to blame but myself. I'd made these choices, accepted this proposal, planned this wedding. The fact that I'd realized it was all wrong didn't change the momentum carrying me toward that altar. The week of the wedding arrived with a flurry of activity. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night, the ceremony Saturday afternoon. Family members descended on Chicago from various cities. Thomas's mother orchestrated everything with military precision, while I smiled and nodded and felt like I was watching it all happen to someone else. Thursday night, I sat in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, where tradition dictated I spend the night before the rehearsal. My dress hung on the closet door, a confection of lace and silk that had cost more than my first car. On the dresser sat my veil, my shoes, the something old and something borrowed items my mother had carefully selected. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My hands shook as I opened it. I tried to respect your choice, tried to let you go, but I can't watch you do this to yourself. If you marry him tomorrow, I'll accept it and never contact you again. But if you're having even the smallest doubt, if any part of you knows this is wrong, don't walk down that aisle. Don't condemn us both to a lifetime of what if. D. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then reread it a dozen times. He was right. Of course he was right. I was making a terrible mistake, one I would regret for the rest of my life. But calling off a wedding less than 48 hours before it happened, the scandal, the expense, the humiliation for Thomas and his family, the cost seemed insurmountable. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my childhood bed, watching shadows move across the ceiling, weighing duty against desire, security against passion, the life I'd chosen against the life I truly wanted. By morning, I still hadn't decided. The rehearsal went smoothly. We walked through our positions, practiced the timing, listened to the string quartet run through their program. Thomas held my hand throughout, beaming with happiness, while I felt like I was suffocating. His family surrounded us. Mother, father, 2 sisters, various aunts and uncles and cousins, all celebrating the upcoming union, all oblivious to my internal turmoil. At the rehearsal dinner, I sat at the head table between Thomas and his father, picking at salmon I couldn't taste, while toast after toast celebrated our upcoming marriage. Thomas's best friend made jokes about lost freedom and ball and chains. His sister talked about how perfect we were together, how she'd known from the moment she met me that I was the one. The one. What did that even mean? Was Thomas the one because he was safe and appropriate and made sense on paper? Or was the one the person who made your heart race, who challenged you to be your best self, who saw all of you and loved you anyway? I excused myself to the restroom, needing air, needing to think. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone and stared at Dario's message from the night before. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Elena, everything okay? Thomas's sister Claire had followed me out. Fine, I said automatically, putting my phone away. Just needed a moment. Cold feet? She asked with a knowing smile. Totally normal. I was a wreck the day before my wedding. But you went through with it. Because James was absolutely right for me, and Thomas is absolutely right for you. Everyone can see it. You two fit together perfectly. Did we? Or did we just look like we fit because we were both good at playing our roles, at meeting expectations, at being who others wanted us to be? You're so lucky, Claire continued, touching up her lipstick in a compact mirror. Thomas is a catch, stable, successful, comes from a good family. You'll never have to worry about anything with him. Never have to worry. Never feel uncertain or challenged or scared. Never be fully alive. I should get back, I said, my voice sounding distant. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. I laughed at appropriate moments, thanked people for their well wishes, accepted kisses on my cheek from relatives I barely knew. Thomas was radiant beside me, talking about our honeymoon plans to Tuscany, about the house we'd start looking for after we returned, about the children we'd have in a few years. It all sounded so perfect, so planned, so utterly lifeless. That night, alone again in my childhood bedroom, I finally let myself cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body, mourning the loss of the life I might have had, the woman I might have been if I'd been brave enough to choose passion over security. My phone lit up with another message. Dario again, his final message. Last chance, Elena. The church is St. Michael's, 2 p.m. If you show up, I'll know you've made your choice. If you don't, if you go through with marrying him, I'll disappear from your life completely. But know this. What we have doesn't come along twice in a lifetime. Don't throw it away because you're afraid. Be brave. Be yourself. Choose love. Choose us. I pressed the phone to my chest, my tears coming harder. He was asking me to do the impossible, to blow up my entire life, to hurt people I cared about, to embrace uncertainty and danger, and a world I didn't fully understand. But the alternative was marrying Thomas tomorrow, condemning myself to a life half-lived, always wondering what might have been. I cried until I had no tears left, until exhaustion finally claimed me sometime after 3 a.m. My wedding day dawned clear and cold, a perfect December afternoon with snow threatening, but holding off. My mother came to wake me, her eyes shining with emotion as she saw me in my childhood bed one last time before I became a married woman. I can't believe my little girl is getting married, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. You've grown into such a remarkable woman, Elena. I'm so proud of you. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they felt like weights, adding to the crushing pressure building in my chest. The morning passed in a blur of preparations. Hair and makeup artists transformed me into a bridal version of myself. flawless, glowing, utterly unrecognizable as the woman having a complete emotional breakdown. My bridesmaids arrived, champagne was poured, photos were taken of us getting ready. Through it all, I moved on autopilot, smiling and laughing and pretending everything was perfect, while inside I screamed. "Time to put on the dress," my mother announced at 1 o'clock. My bridesmaids helped me into it, zipping up the back, arranging the train, placing the veil on my carefully styled hair. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a beautiful bride. But I didn't see myself. "You're stunning," my sister breathed. "Thomas is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Thomas. Kind, stable Thomas, who had done nothing wrong except be exactly who he'd always been. A good man who didn't happen to be the right man for me. The car arrived to take us to the church. St. Michael's was old and beautiful, the same church where Thomas's parents had married, where his grandparents had married before them. A family tradition. I was being absorbed into their traditions, their expectations, their life. We pulled up to the side entrance where brides traditionally arrived. Through the windows, I could see the church was packed, at least 200 guests, all dressed in their finest, all waiting to witness the ceremony. The string quartet played softly. The flowers Rebecca had helped me select were arranged beautifully along the aisle and the altar. It was perfect. Picture perfect. Absolutely perfect. And completely wrong. My bridesmaids went ahead to take their positions. My father appeared in his tuxedo, offering his arm, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You ready, sweetheart?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "Daddy, I don't think I can do this." His expression shifted to concern. "Cold feet? That's natural. Not cold feet. I don't love him. Not the way I should. Not the way he deserves." My father's face went pale. "Elena, there are 200 people in that church. Thomas is standing at the altar waiting for you. You can't—" "I know," I said miserably. "I know it's terrible timing. I know it will cause a scandal. But marrying him when I feel like this, isn't that worse?" Before he could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared. "We're ready for you. The groom is in position." My father looked at me helplessly. "Elena, whatever you're feeling right now, we can work through it. But you need to get through today first. The ceremony, the reception. Then, if you're still having doubts, you and Thomas can talk. Maybe delay the honeymoon." "I can't." The words came out strangled. I can't walk down that aisle and promise to love him forever when I know it's a lie. "But—" The coordinator was looking between us with alarm. "Is everything okay? We're on a schedule." The music changed. The wedding march began. My father gripped my arm. "Elena, we have to go. Now. You can figure everything else out later. But right now, you have to walk." I let him guide me to the doors of the sanctuary, moving on numb legs. Through the small windows, I could see the packed church, everyone standing, turned toward the back, waiting for my entrance. I could see Thomas at the altar in his tuxedo, his face bright with happiness and anticipation, and then, just as the doors started to open, I saw something else. In the very last pew, standing alone, was Dario. He wasn't dressed for a wedding, just a dark coat over dark clothes, his hair wind-mussed, his face pale and strained. Our eyes met across the distance, and everything else fell away. He'd come. He'd actually come to the church, even knowing it might mean watching me marry someone else. The doors fully opened. The congregation stood. The music swelled. Every face turned toward me with anticipation. I took one step forward on my father's arm, then another. Each step feeling like walking through water, each breath harder to draw. Thomas's face was radiant, his eyes locked on me as I moved slowly down the aisle. His parents beamed from the front row. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. And in the back, Dario watched with an expression of such anguish that it physically hurt to see. I was halfway down the aisle when I realized I couldn't do it. Couldn't take another step. Couldn't lie to all these people, to Thomas, to myself. But the momentum carried me forward. My father's arm firm through mine. The music propelling us. The weight of expectation like a physical force pushing me toward the altar. We reached the front. Thomas took my hand, squeezing it gently, his smile full of love and trust and complete faith in our future together. The priest began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." His words washed over me, meaningless sounds as I stood frozen, staring at Thomas while my mind screamed. The ceremony proceeded, readings, prayers, a song by the soloist we'd selected. I participated mechanically, my voice barely audible when required to respond. And then the moment came. If anyone present knows of any reason why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, the priest intoned, speak now, or forever hold your peace. The traditional pause followed. No one ever objected at actual weddings. It was ceremonial, a formality. Except this time. I object. The voice came from the back of the church, deep and clear and absolutely certain. Every head turned. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Dario stood in the center aisle, no longer in the last pew, but halfway down, visible to everyone. His dark eyes were fixed on me, blazing with intensity. I object, he repeated, louder this time. Because Elena doesn't love him. She loves me. Chaos erupted. Thomas's mother made a sound like a wounded animal. My mother clutched her chest. The bridesmaids gasped in unison. Thomas's face went from confusion to understanding to devastation in the space of seconds. Elena? He asked, his voice breaking. What is he talking about? I looked at Thomas, kind, stable Thomas, who had done nothing to deserve this humiliation. Then I looked at Dario, standing in the middle of the church like an avenging angel, risking everything to give me one last chance at honesty. And I knew what I had to do. I'm sorry, I whispered to Thomas, pulling my hand from his. I'm so sorry. But he's right. Elna, no! My mother cried out. But I was already moving, already gathering my dress in my hands and stepping down from the altar. The church erupted in shocked exclamations, people rising from their seats, hands reaching out to stop me. I ignored them all, my eyes locked on Dario as I walked back down that aisle, each step feeling lighter than the last, as if I was shedding the weight of expectations and propriety with every movement. When I reached him, he took my hand, my left hand, still wearing Thomas's ring, and pulled me against him. Are you sure? He asked urgently, quietly, giving me one last chance to change my mind. This is going to be messy. There's no going back from this. I'm sure, I said, and I'd never meant anything more in my life. I choose you. I choose us. His smile was brilliant, transforming his face. Then let's get out of here. We ran down the rest of the aisle hand in hand, my wedding dress flying behind me, my veil coming loose. Behind us, the church erupted in absolute pandemonium. My mother wailing, Thomas's mother shouting, people calling my name, demanding explanation. But I didn't look back. Dario's car was waiting outside, not the sensible sedan I'd expected, but a sleek black motorcycle, completely inappropriate for a woman in a wedding dress and completely perfect. You're kidding, I said, staring at it. I came prepared for a dramatic exit. His eyes gleamed with mischief and joy. Hold on tight. He swung onto the motorcycle, then pulled me on behind him. I gathered the ridiculous volume of my dress as best I could, wrapping my arms around his waist and pressing against his back. Where are we going? I shouted as the engine roared to life. Away from here, Anywhere you want." He turned his head slightly, his profile sharp against the winter sky. "Together." As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of the church doors bursting open, people streaming out, Thomas standing frozen on the steps, his face a mask of shock and hurt. Guilt stabbed through me. I'd handled this terribly, hurt people who didn't deserve it, caused a scandal that would echo for years. There would be consequences, recriminations, bridges burned. But as we accelerated down the street, the cold wind whipping my veil away completely, the city blurring around us, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. I felt free. We didn't stop until we were miles from the church, pulling into a secluded overlook that faced the lake. Dario killed the engine, and in the sudden silence, I could hear my heart pounding, the reality of what I'd just done crashing over me. "Oh my God," I breathed. I just left my own wedding. I just humiliated Thomas in front of everyone, his family, my family, all those people. "Hey." Dario turned on the bike, taking my face in his hands. "Breathe. Just breathe." "What did I do? What did I just do?" "You chose yourself," he said firmly. "You chose honesty over convenience. You chose love over security. You were incredibly brave. I feel like a monster." "You feel like someone who made an impossible choice," he corrected. "Yes, people are hurt. Yes, this is messy. But would marrying him have been better? Living a lie for the rest of your life?" I thought about it, about what my life would have been. Waking up beside Thomas every day, always pretending, always performing, slowly dying inside while maintaining the perfect facade. Never feeling truly seen, truly known, truly alive. "No," I admitted. "It would have been worse." "Then you did the right thing. The hard thing, but the right thing." My phone started ringing, my mother's ringtone, then my father's, then Thomas's. I stared at the device, watching the names flash across the screen, unable to bring myself to answer. "You don't have to talk to them yet," Dario said gently. "Not until you're ready." I turned off the phone and looked at him. This man who had turned my life upside down, who had refused to let me settle for less than I deserved, who had been brave enough to stand up in a church full of people and declare the truth. "Now what?" I asked. "I have no job. Rebecca will probably fire me after this scandal. I have no home. I certainly can't go back to the apartment I share with Thomas. My family is probably disowning me as we speak. I'm standing here in a wedding dress that I'll never need, and I don't know what to do next." Dario's smile was soft, understanding. "Now you come home with me. We figure out the rest as we go. Together." "Together," I repeated, testing the word. It felt right, felt true in a way that my engagement never had. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you, Elena. I've loved you for 5 years. I'll love you for the rest of my life." "I love you too," I whispered. The words I should have said that summer. The words I'd been too scared to acknowledge until now. I'm still scared. Your world. What you do. We'll navigate it together, he promised. I told you, things are changing. I'm changing. And with you beside me, I can be the man you deserve. As the winter sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I stood in my wedding dress in the arms of the man I loved and felt, for the first time in 5 years, that everything was going to be okay. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be consequences, angry phone calls, broken relationships, social exile from the world I'd briefly belonged to. My business partnership with Rebecca might not survive. My parents might not forgive me. Thomas certainly wouldn't. But as Dario helped me back onto the motorcycle and we rode toward his estate, toward our future. I knew I'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the safe choice, but the true choice. The choice that made me fully, completely, dangerously alive. The Castellano estate looked different in summer. Gardens I'd only seen in winter bloom now exploded with color. Roses climbing the loggia, lavender lining the paths. I stood on the terrace, watching the late afternoon sun paint the lake in gold, and marveled at how much had changed in half a year. Dario emerged from the house, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He'd shed his suit jacket and tie, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly mussed from running his fingers through it while he worked. "Your parents just called," he said, handing me a glass. "They want to come for dinner next week." I took the wine, pleasure and relief washing through me. "They called you directly?" "First time." His smile was wry. "Your mother was very polite, almost friendly." My relationship with my parents had been strained since the wedding disaster. They'd been hurt, angry, mortified by the scandal I'd caused. But slowly, over months of patient conversation and demonstrated commitment to Dario, they'd begun to soften. This invitation was a breakthrough. "Thomas got married," I said, sharing the news I'd learned from Claire, his sister, who'd surprisingly stayed in touch. "Last weekend, small ceremony, family only." Dario's hand found mine. "How do you feel about that?" "Happy for him," I said honestly. "He deserves someone who loves him completely, without reservation. Someone who doesn't have to force it." "Any regrets?" I thought about it, about the life I might have had, the safe path I'd nearly taken. "None. This is where I'm supposed to be. With you." He pulled me against him, his arms warm and solid around me. "Rebecca called too. She wants to meet about a new project." My former business partner had been furious after the wedding incident, and our partnership had ended in a flurry of lawyers and buyout negotiations. But time had apparently healed some wounds. She'd reached out tentatively last month, and we'd had coffee. Awkward at first, then gradually warming to something that might eventually become friendship again. "She's offering to work together?" "Seems like it. She's building a new team, wants your expertise on a historic renovation." "I'll call her tomorrow," I decided. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. Inside the house, our house now, I could hear staff preparing dinner. This life still felt surreal sometimes, the wealth and the staff and the responsibilities that came with being Dario's partner. But I was learning, adapting, finding my place in his world while staying true to myself. "I have something for you," Dario said suddenly. He withdrew a small velvet box from his pocket. My breath caught. "Dario, before you panic, it's not what you think. Not yet, anyway." He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring, a simple band of platinum with a single emerald, my birthstone. "I know you're not ready for marriage, not after what you just escaped. But I wanted you to have something that shows my commitment, my promise that I'm in this for the long haul." Tears pricked my eyes as he slipped it on my right hand. "It's perfect." "When you're ready, whenever that is, I'll ask properly. With the ring you deserve, the proposal you deserve. But for now, I just want you to know that you're it for me, Elena. You're my choice every single day." I rose on my toes to kiss him, pouring everything I felt into the contact. When we pulled apart, both of us breathless, I saw my entire future in his eyes. "I choose you too," I whispered. "Every single day." As the sun set on the most beautiful house I'd ever restored, in the arms of the man who'd fought for me when I was too scared to fight for myself, I felt something I'd never thought possible after the disaster of that December afternoon. I felt joy. Pure, uncomplicated, thoroughly alive joy. The scandal had faded. My relationships were healing. My career was rebuilding. And I had found something I'd thought I'd lost forever. Myself. The real Elena, fierce and passionate and unafraid. The woman who'd been brave enough to say no at the altar and yes to real love. The woman who'd finally come home.